In this video, I'm going to show and describe my automatic drip system, my automatic water change system for my aquarium rack. So everyone who has multiple aquariums or even one aquarium knows that water changes are one of the worst things that, they're not fun. Filling 5-gallon buckets, making sure they're at the right temperature, carrying them back and forth, siphoning out water, it's just not fun. If you can automate that task, you can save so much time and effort, and you can make the hobby a lot more enjoyable for yourself. So that's what I've done here. Some of these ideas are mine, but they're mainly compiled from ideas I've gotten from many different YouTubers, not necessarily one person in particular, but I'll put the links to all of the products I used in the video description. This isn't necessarily a how-to video, you're not going to see me drilling the aquariums or cutting the PVC, but I'm going to describe it as best I can, and if you have any additional questions, feel free to leave them in the comments below. So every auto water change system has to have two main components, water in and water out. We're going to start with the water out. How does water leave my aquariums? So you'll notice in the top right-hand corner of each one of my aquariums, and my apologies for the focusing issues on the camera here, but in the top right-hand corner of each of my aquariums, I have a drainage pipe. This drainage pipe, on the very top of it, has a flat strainer. The flat strainer is to stop any fish from going into the pipe. From there, we use furniture-grade black PVC pipe, so I didn't have to paint it. It already came black. So the strainer is just a slip fit right into the black PVC pipe. The PVC elbow goes into another piece of PVC pipe which screws into that bulkhead that goes through the back of the aquarium. Each one of these aquariums was drilled with a diamond-tipped hole saw, and on the top of the strainer I just cut a little hole in the top of each one so that if somehow the entire strainer clogged up, water could still get into the strainer and the aquarium cannot overflow. But I used a diamond-tipped hole saw to cut the holes for the bulkheads, and then I put the bulkheads on there. They don't require any silicone or anything like that. They're just, hand tightened. Well, I think it was a little past hand tightened. But then attached to that is some piping and tubes and hoses. The hoses, all 9 of the hoses on this rack, go to one main drain pipe at the very bottom, and that is also just that black furniture-grade PVC. This is all a gravity drain system, so this doesn't really need to be rated for pressure. I did glue these PVC pieces together with PVC glue, but it doesn't need to be rated for pressure. I put this little cap on the end here just so I can open it up, and occasionally I'll pour vinegar down there to help clean out any gunk that might be forming in the drain pipe. But the drain pipe is just about an inch lower than the bottom aquarium's bulkhead holes. That way it can still gravity feed down into that pipe. So the pipe then goes through that back wall, that far wall, and you can see right here how it's just a bit lower. It's just a little bit of a decline so that water will continue to gravity feed and it will never go in the opposite direction. And I did wrap some wires around the black pipe and hang it on the back of the rack so that the hose isn't supporting the weight of that long pipe in the back. But you can see the hose goes through this back wall, so the pipe goes back into a hose. That long drainage black pipe goes into a hose. The hose goes through the wall, and I cut a slice in the hose right here and then just kind of reattached it with these fittings so that I can open up the hose if I ever need to drain out, to pull out any blockage or pour more vinegar in there or anything like that. But then that hose continues along the back of my basement, and then it goes underground and into the pit, the plumbing pit in my basement, which then pipes out to my septic tank. So as I mentioned, this is a drip system. Water drips in and overflows through that strainer, and water is constantly, dripping through this entire hose system and constantly dripping into that pit, and then it all just gets pumped up into my septic. So it's kind of an overflow drip system. So that's the water out. Now for the water in. We're going to start at the very beginning. The water enters my home through the side of my foundation right here, and then you might see this little white wire. That goes to an automatic water shutoff I have. That's more just for the whole house, for the sake of the whole house. If that little sensor on the floor ever detects water, it will shut off water to the entire house. So if anything went wrong with my plumbing and my basement began to flood, that little sensor would shut off water to the entire house, assuming that the break in my plumbing is not before that cutoff. Then I tee off my cold water, and I have a little shutoff valve right here. This is the section that goes to my fish tanks. So this is just cold water. I have it run through a 25 PSI regulator, pressure regulator. It goes along the wall in just standard PVC piping. I put in a little valve right here, and I keep it with a little, it's in the closed position now, but I keep this screwed on at the end too to just make sure nothing leaks out, but that's just to relieve pressure if I ever need to open up these filters right here. So this is the water purifier 3-stage system. They're cheap, they're on Amazon, I'll put a link to that. That's mainly just for chlorine and big particles. Then it goes to an irrigation valve, and this irrigation valve is hooked up to this irrigation controller. This is the heart of this system. This regulates when the irrigation valve is going to be opened and closed during the day. I can program in all the different times that my tanks are going to get water and when they're not. They sell Wi-Fi ones too. You see these used a lot in sprinkler systems for lawns. You could have a Wi-Fi one that connects to your phone, and I may upgrade this one so that I can control my water change system for my phone someday, but for now I just use this one. And I could use this for up to 4 different zones, but I just run all my tank on one zone, so there's only one valve that opens and closes, not multiple. But you could have different times for all the different valves for different amounts of water changes. So that's pretty much the heart of the system. From there, it goes to this clear backflow regulator, and then it goes to another 25 PSI regulator, which is kind of unnecessary. And then it goes to a 15 PSI regulator, also kind of unnecessary. I built those before I put that 25 earlier in the system. And then it goes to this little piece right here that converts it to drip irrigation line. And I use these high pressure fittings. These are the ones that I find work best. And then I also I dab a little bit of pipe dope on it before I put the irrigation line over the fitting, and I do that with all of these. I use those high pressure clamps, a little bit of pipe dope, but I made my own manifold here because I tried a couple of different manifolds and they all leaked. So I just made my own manifold with a bunch of T-valves and pressure clamps and pipe dope. It's split off into 9 different lines, and these 9 different lines go through the ceiling and they come out on the other side where my fish tanks are, way in the back. So these 9 lines come out and they go to each one of the fish tanks. And on the end of those lines, I have my drip emitters. I run 2 gallon per hour drip emitters on 8 of the tanks, and then on one of them that I was running some heavy stocking in, I had a lot of fry. I run a 3 gallon per hour drip emitter. But these little drip emitters back here, let me try to get a better angle for you. These are special non-clog drip emitters because I did have an issue with my original drip emitters clogging, and you can see I kind of have the drip emitter line hanging from the top there so that it's not pulling downwards on the drip emitter. And then on the end of the drip emitter, I just put a little bit of air line just so that it goes through the top of the aquarium. That little tubing goes through the top of the aquarium and it'll spit out the water, not like on top of the lid, but below the lid. And then I use those high pressure clamps on the top of the drip emitter to hook it up to the irrigation line. And again, a tiny bit of pipe dope, and I never have any issues with leaks because I did have an issue with leaks before. I was using those high pressure clamps and a little bit of pipe dope. But when the system's on, you'll see the water coming from that little bit of air line right there. And I will turn on the system now to show it to you guys. But each one of these sits pretty snug in there. I made the holes in the lids just big enough for the airline so it sits pretty snug. I can manually turn on the water to the zone so that I can, do as much time as I want, or I can just run it on auto as well. One thing I forgot to mention too, that 3-stage filter system. Right now I'm just about changing the filters annually. I'm not sure if that's the right amount or not, but my local municipality doesn't use chloramine, so it's mainly just for the chlorine and for any large particles. But I have turned on the system here, and it does make like a little squeaking noise at first as it pushes out some of the air, and then you can see there it's dripping in that water that is supposedly 2 gallons per hour right there. So the reason I only run one zone, as opposed to, you'll see other people run systems that have maybe more tanks than I do. They'll run multiple zones for, different amounts of water to different sets of tanks. I just have these 9 tanks on one rack, and I'm pretty much good with them all getting the same amount of water changes. Like I said, I had that one fry tank that I wanted to get more water, and I didn't really need to have a different zone. All I did was up the drip emitter to a 3 gallon per hour drip emitter. So that tank was now getting 3 gallons per hour on all the water changes versus 2 gallons per hour. I've done the math, and with the timing I have set up on these 20-gallon tanks, I think I'm changing somewhere between 50 to 70% of the water weekly. It's kind of tough to tell with drip systems how much of the water you're truly changing, because water drips in and then overflows through that strainer, so you don't know how much new water versus old water. It all kind of mixes together, and how much is leaving the aquarium for new water versus old water. The main thing is you're adding new water constantly. Some of the new water might go over through the strainer. It all kind of combines, but you're constantly adding new water. One of the big things with this system too, running this drip system, and why I only teed off the cold water, is because I drip slowly. The heaters in my tanks have time to compensate for the change in temperature. So even though it's dripping in very cold water, it's dripping it in so slowly that I've only ever seen the temperatures on my tanks drop maybe 1 or 2 degrees. And if that's too much for you, you can just do smaller increments. I do two 30-minute drip sessions a day, but you could split it up more, and you could do a 15 and then wait a few hours, then do another 15 minutes, then wait a few hours. So it's not as big changes on the water temperature with the cold water being added. And running a system like this with such large amounts of water changes has enabled me to just run sponge filters in each of the tanks, and between the sponges and the large water changes, I don't really have any need for any other filtration besides, an occasional vacuuming every few weeks to vacuum up some poop that's built up. But besides that, the tanks run great. If I was to change anything on this entire setup, the only things I'd change is obviously removing those redundant pressure regulators on the water in system, and then I would maybe upgrade to a Wi-Fi controller. I think it would be cool to be able to control it from my phone. It's not completely necessary, but if I was out of town or something and I had somebody maybe feeding the fish for me, but I knew there was going to be a big rainstorm and I wanted to do a big additional water change, I could just do it from my phone. I wouldn't need to tell them how the irrigation controller works. I could just, say, let's do a big water change right now. So that would be cool to have. And I know the Wi-Fi controllers exist, but I just really haven't felt the need to splurge on one quite yet. But I love this system. I've been using it for over a year, and it's worked wonders. It has made the hobby so much more enjoyable for me. Between that and the sponge filters and all the heaters maintaining the temperature and everything, the only thing I do is feed them at night and vacuum once every few weeks. That's it. That's literally all I need to do. Besides that, it's just fry care, pulling fry from caves and whatnot. But the fish seem to be loving it. They breed, pretty regularly for me, so everything seems to be going very well so far. If there's anything you'd do differently with the system, please let me know in the comments down below, because I'm always looking to make improvements. I built this whole system based on other YouTubers' ideas, so I'd love to hear your ideas down below. And if you're new to my channel, hit that subscribe button for lots of awesome aquarium videos just like this. And as always, thank you for watching.